What's the most intelligent thing you've witnessed an animal do? When I lived on a river in the Botanist for a few years, I was endlessly entertained by animals/birds playing games, and young ones trying to learn how to fly, catch food, swim, etc. One autumn a friend commented on the number of geese floating by in the evenings. So we decided to keep count. Pretty soon we realized the geese would float to a certain spot, then in a group take off and fly in the upstream direction, which didn't make sense. Until we realized we were counting the same geese over and over. They were floating the river for fun. There was a long patch of low rapids, and they were flying to the top and drafting down, honking all the way. I had this mutt beagle mix. One time I was making a sandwich, and he was begging for food. I promptly told him to go away. With a defeated look in his eye, he starts to walk away. All of a sudden his ears pop up, and he starts barking at the door and sits in front of it. He always did this if someone was at the door. I put my sandwich on the counter, and go to the door to unlock it. Once I get to the door, the little fucker bolts across the room, jumps on the counter, grabs the sandwich and runs and hides. I was even that mad I was impressed. When I was a child, my friend and I were rounding up sheep with our fathers and the dogs. It was a hilly area and we were pushing them down a gully into the yards. One of the dogs took off over a hill, and about 15 minutes later it met us back near the yards with 15 extra sheep that were missed. I'll use the same story I used for another unrelated question on here. While unintelligent in actions, it takes some kind of intelligence for an animal to know how to play games. I witnessed two crows perched up on the light post outside my house playing what I can only describe as a game of chicken. They both would jump off the light post simultaneously and free fall towards the ground and fly off at the very last second. My guess is whoever got closer to the ground won that round, but who knows? Well, on one of their attempts, one of the crows waited too long and smacked right into the ground. Lol. It got up and flew back to the top of the pole, but to this day it's the funniest damn thing I've ever witnessed, and it was one of those things I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own two eyes. My Siamese cat once opened a cupboard in the kitchen and dragged a sealed bag of cat food into the lunch for me to open because I'd forgotten to feed her. At least she didn't rip it open right there in the kitchen. Your cat has nice manners. A chimp at a zoo was clapping like the star of the show, and when we would start clapping he would dance for us. He was hyping us up. The greatest showman. I love zoo animals who interact with guests. I went to the zoo a few weeks ago and there was a cockatoo in the kookaburra. Probably botched that spelling, whoops, and I was standing and looking, and the cockatoo said hello, and I was like OMG hi. And then we spent a good few minutes just saying hi and hello back to each other and mimicking each other's head movements. I was so pleasantly surprised. My Jack Russell would come into the living room, see our large mutt dog in the prime laying area, calmly walk over to the door and ask to go out. Large dog would leap up and run excitedly to the door. Jack Russell would wait for a human to head to the door and ask out again. All the while the large goofball was getting more excited. Someone would open the door, large dog would barrel out and bound around the yard before looking back at the door, where the Jack Russell would stand long enough to make eye contact with him before smugly walking over to the prime laying area and kicking her feet out behind her to relax. If the mutt came back in, he would go stand by her and just look heartbroken before going somewhere else to lay. I miss that smug little girl. Goofball gets all the prime spots now. I was crossing a huge frozen river in the winter. The ice was about 1.5 foot in thickness, but some areas had low density. It was my dog, myself, my friend, and my friend's dog. My friend crossed first and had one of her legs break through the less dense ice, but she made it. I then watched her dog cross very nervously and carefully in roughly the same path and not crack the ice. Then came my turn. I actually sent my dog to go first. He sniffs the ground and goes to cross, but he takes this weird scribbly path instead of going just straight. I ended up following him and noticed that the ice was the most densest there. I cross without a problem. My dog places one of her squeaky toys near a small hole between our fence and the neighbors. She then squeaks it and waits for the dog next door to approach in anticipation of retrieving the toy, just so she can bark at him and be an asshole. Edit. Today I learned there are so many asshole pets out there. We helped raise/rehabilitate a crow when I was a child. It had fallen out of its nest. The nest was much too high for us to return it, and my parents rescued it just in time, since there were some neighborhood cats getting ready to pounce on and eat it, so we took care of it till it could fly and take care of itself. It was an incredibly smart bird, very social, and it enjoyed pranks. Its favorite prank was to wait till someone was sitting on one of the lounge chairs, then it would walk under, reach up through the slats and pinch their butt with his beak. It would do this to many people, but it had one particular person, a friend of my parents, that it seemed to enjoy targeting. She had the best reaction, where she would come leaping out of the chair to see what had gotten her every time. The crow enjoyed that so much that it didn't care if other people were sitting around. It would always look for her. It was not because she had been mean to the crow. She was a nice lady. The crow just legitimately enjoyed messing with people and her in particular. I also had a dog that taught herself how to open the refrigerator, open the pantry, and break out of the car. My parents had to baby-proof the house food supplies against a dog. I spent a lot of time in the local mountains and had summited one of the higher peaks enough times to establish a bit of a relationship with the ravens that lived on it. One summer, I was up there on a day that turned out to be much hotter than forecasted, and one of the ravens approached me like usual, but this time came right next to me as I drank from my bottle and threw his head back, beak open, mimicking the chugging motion. I asked if he wanted some. He croaked in agreement, so I poured some in my hand and held it out. That was still a little too close for comfort for him, so he walked away and proceeded to walk around and inspect the surface of all of the rock until he found a large enough indent to hold some water. He croaked at me and pecked at the spot for me to pour some in, drank it up, and then walked back and bobbed his head happily before flying away. I've always known how intelligent they are, but it still strikes me how human their interactions can be. I was at my nan's house once, and she is a big admirer of wildlife. Big or small, feathered or not, she liked them all. One day she mentioned she had a regular crow visit her that she fed. He would caw if there wasn't any food in the garden and my nan would oblige him, she says. Sure, I thought, until I saw what she was chucking to him. I presumed nuts or seed, but no, slices of bread. Now the crow couldn't carry it away, and he didn't want to eat it out in the open, and in my nan's and my presence, this crow stands on one side of the slice, folds it over, and tries to fly away with it, but no, still too big. So it does the same again, so that it can actually grasp a hold of it this time, and proceeds to fly away with it all folded up. Me stood there slack-jawed at what I just saw. The birds are smarter than they appear, people. I have 3 stories and I honestly cannot decide which is most impressive. Billy the cat was 21 years old. She was having neurological problems, stumbling and bumping into things. So of course I rushed her to the emergency vet. The vet examined her in the exam room, then put her in the cat carrier and took her to the back room for a neurological exam. A few minutes later, she came back and said something like, "Based on what we saw, your cat most likely has a brain tumor." She is also incredibly smart. Once she decided she was done with us, she walked back into the cat carrier, turned around, pulled the door closed, and held it shut. She was given a prognosis of weeks to months to live, and a course of anti-inflammatories. She lived for 2 years after that. I miss my Billy. TT. Momo the corgi is a rescue from a puppy mill. She had no idea how to be a dog when we got her. At age 3, she still did not know any commands, and she was not house trained. She decided that the living room carpet was the best place to pee. So, we used a baby gate to lock her and the other dog in the kitchen. Momo's only option when she had to pee was to go outside, or so we thought. The baby gate in question was pressure mounted. Screws controlled the tension. Momo unscrewed the damn thing so the bottom would swing free like a dog door, pushed her way through, then peed on the living room carpet. Smartass. Caesar the severe macaw was my mom's bird. He was an asshole. He didn't like my ex-husband. One day, he climbed down from his cage, which was normal. He knew how to escape and climbed down to the floor and walked up to my ex. Ex was wearing Doc Martens under his jeans. Caesar started messing with X's jeans, tapping them and pressing on them to figure out where the boot ended. Once he found it, he bit X on the leg, hard enough to leave a raised welt. Fucking dinosaur. Birds are terrifying. Whenever I let my dog dictate the walk, the go sniff command, where I let her lead and give the full extent of the leash, she will walk me to the local pet store 100% of the time. There is an old joke / story about this. A man walks his dog every morning for a couple hours, for years and years. The dog, the man, and his wife are all old, but the man gets sick and dies. His wife decides to uphold the tradition of taking the dog on long walks to honor her husband's memory, since he seemed to enjoy them so much and never missed a day. She takes the dog out and walks down the block, after which the dog instinctively turns left and leads her to the pub down the street. My mom was in her bedroom reading one night and her cell phone started ringing in the other room. Our dog, totally of her own accord, got up, went into the other room, picked up my mom's ringing phone, brought it back to the bedroom, and dropped it in her lap.
Hey guys, we just wanted to thank you for your continued support. Behind the robot voice, we are real people that are working hard to achieve our goals. Please like, subscribe and interact with our videos. It means the world to us. Thanks, the Reddit Rogue team.
r/AskReddit. Serious, what are some of the creepiest declassified documents made available to the public? The creepiest fact is that even the most horrible declassified files are just small part of the documents that came to light. Too many facts went down the drain. The various times that Nixon almost drunkenly started a nuclear war, but Henry Kissinger refused to act until he was sober. This happened multiple times. We could have been Fallout IRL. Busanasensida.com link. This FBI investigating file titled Animal Mutilation. Back in the 1970s-80s, the media's attention was drawn to some anomalies taking place not only on American cattle farms, but all over the world. Cow corpses were being discovered in fields, missing organs, with surgical holes in their sides, with no blood. For a brief time, this was passed off as a strange coincidence, but eventually, the public got so worked up that the FBI commissioned an investigation. 6 months and $45,000 later, they found nothing. Nothing. No trace of a person, machine, alien, anything. Everyone was left hanging, but strangely, it died down. The reports of animal mutilations have simply stacked up to since then, and to this day there have been excess of 10,000. The removal of cow vulvas and bulldongs caused speculation that weirdos were involved. Didn't know dong was a technical term. Or weirdo. Memo from Roger Boyce Giuliano ring erosion. Months prior to the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, he essentially predicted, and forewarned, that the rocket O-rings would fail if the shuttle launched in cold weather. Wasn't he blackballed for this or coming public with it? My dad is an engineer and has an article about this in his office as a reminder of his obligation to do the right thing no matter the cost. I think he actually regretted not being more vocal about it because it haunted him the rest of his life. As far as I know, he never hesitated to voice it, and someone who he tried to report this to simply didn't care. There was a declassified Soviet program where the military tried to use rabbits to psychically communicate between submarines. It was based on the premise that a mother rabbit reacts strongly when one of its offspring is killed violently, even if the mother rabbit is miles or hundreds of miles away. The program involved keeping the mother rabbits at a land-based station and killing the baby rabbits in the submarine. Message content was determined by the frequency and the strength of the reaction from the mother rabbit, which was supposedly dependent on the violence of the death. The documents were declassified a while ago, but only translated in 2016. Just adopted a rabbit. This hits close to home. Did you get my message? Operation Unthinkable. The plan for the UK and US to launch a surprise attack against the USSR at the end of World War II. UK, US, and what was left of Wehrmacht. They literally planned to use just defeated Germans to get the numbers they needed. But keep in mind that the military often has multiple plans for things that are not even remotely likely to happen. So it's more of an analysis of what would happen if we did this than an actual operation plan. Plan Red, for instance, was a plan for war between the US and British Empire. There was also a plan for an invasion of Canada in the early 1900s in case the US sides with Germans. As entering the war on the side of UK France was by no means a guarantee at the outbreak of World War I. The WikiLeaks documents about PRISM and about the smart device hacking methods along with how to set said devices into a false off mode. Every cell phone without a removable battery could easily may already have this. How about the Filmarillion? There was this user on 4chan called UTV who frequented the sports page and made lots of posts. Just normal posts too. Nothing controversial. Anyway, he had a stalker known as the Archiver who would follow and comment every single post of UTV. After a while UTV would get sick of these comments and he'd tell him to get lost. But the Archiver would just respond to them too. Eventually he started posting his own compilations of the interactions he had with UTV all over the sports page. His final post was him confessing that the people in his life found out about his obsession and he is now being monitored. But before he goes offline he wanted to share his Filmarillion, a 92-page document of everything he had ever made to do with UTV, and he requested that it be for UTV's eyes only. Of course that didn't stop people from opening it. Inside were post compilations of UTV's posts, posts superimposed onto 3D models, extensive poems and sonnets, a detailed description of how their life together would be, and how UTV's funeral would pan out. I'm pretty sure there were real life details about UTV in there as well. Upon release of the document, UTV's only response was, and he contacted the police and went into hiding. Appropriate response to find out someone wrote about their lives together and fact about your life is definitely. That's creepy, especially on 4chan. I always thought that 4chan was a beacon of anonymity. The government made it illegal to expose the government for the illegal things they have done. When exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you are being ruled by criminals. Edward Snowden. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. George Orwell. The NSA and Catalog. It contains a list of capabilities which the NSA and other national security administrations have been in possession of and use for the purpose of cyber surveillance. The document was created in 2008 and was made public in 2013. The technology in this document is incredible and terrifying for the idea of privacy. If you think they don't know everything, they do. These devices are everywhere. Could be in any cable, any computer, any phone, any anything. Nightstand. Portable system that wirelessly installs Microsoft Windows. They went too far with this one. Dropout Jeep. A software implant for the Apple iPhone that utilizes modular mission applications to provide specific SIGINT functionality. This functionality includes the ability to remotely push-pull files from the device, SMS retrieval, contact list retrieval, voicemail, geolocation, hot mic, camera capture, cell tower location, etc. Command, control and data exfiltration can occur over SMS messaging or a GPRS data connection. All communications with the implant will be covered and encrypted. 8. Yet they have better access to iPhones than we'll ever get. Don't get that false sense of security that your iPhone data is safe from the government. Operation Lack biological warfare testing done on US cities. Principally, the operation involved spraying large areas with zinc cadmium sulfide, which is very toxic. Men who were affected died of cancer and the testing was never followed up on. Most of the neighborhood's genetic makeup was dug up for no reason and no apologies were made. My mom told me one time she was living in California. They stated they were spraying to get rid of fruit flies gnats. They woke up and all the fish in their tanks were bleeding out their eyes, and she also had a miscarriage a week later. That story always stuck with me and made me wonder, what in the ship did I just read? The reason that insane conspiracy theories can so easily take root, because reality can be so much worse. So I was born in the Bay Area of California and was a small child when this spraying took place. I want to say it was in 1981 or 1982. My sister was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2000. At 23 years old, she passed away in 2013 after a very long fight. My father was also diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, his in 2004. He was able to beat his. I absolutely think it has to do with the spraying. It literally took the paint off of our cars. Nasty, nasty stuff. Duck them. Project Pluto is pretty horrific. The proposed use for nuclear-powered ramjets would be to power a cruise missile, called SLAM, for supersonic low-altitude missile. In order to reach ramjet speed, it would be launched from the ground by a cluster of conventional rocket boosters. Once it reached cruising altitude and was far away from populated areas, the nuclear reactor would be made critical. Since nuclear power gave it almost unlimited range, the missile could cruise in circles over the ocean until ordered down to the deck for its supersonic dash to targets in the Soviet Union. The SLAM, as proposed, would carry a payload of many nuclear weapons to be dropped on multiple targets, making the cruise missile into an unmanned bomber. After delivering all its warheads, the missile could then spend weeks flying over populated areas at low altitudes, causing tremendous ground damage with its shockwave and fallout. When it finally lost enough power to fly and crash landed, the engine would have a good chance of spewing deadly radiation for months to come. Double quote. Source: Wikipedia.org link. Damn, that's ducked. The Russians have been developing hypersonic ramjet nuclear missiles, like, right now. I'm not a scientist, but they sound like they are pretty much indefensible. The JFK assassination documents never fully being released as they keep getting pushed back. The documents themselves are creepy in the sense of how contradicting they are, but what makes it truly creepy is the full release keeps getting pushed back. They've gotta be hiding something in there. Anything involving Japan's Unit 731 during World War II. It was a military chemical and biological warfare division that experimented on powers. There is a list somewhere on web of the last words of inmates punished by death in Texas. Goodbye, warden. Holy fuck. Some of those statements cut off in the middle. Not hard to guess why. Thank you for using me. That dash on the end is clearly intentional. One ended with its burning. That one is really ducking haunting. That's crazy. One of the guys was cut off when he tried to explain how he was being persecuted because of a cover-up. He was saying that an officer, whom he had killed, was in a fit of rage before he ran into him, inmate, and that he only killed the officer in self-defense. But the evidence to prove the officer's state of mind was not allowed in court, and therefore the jury did not have a fair perspective. They cut him off when he was trying to explain this. None of the other guys were cut off, from what I've read so far. Crazy. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the African American community. Had to read this in its entirety for a medical ethics class. The whole class was super ducking depressing, but this study was the cherry on top of ducked up situations. Operation Northwoods. Proposed false flag attacks against American civilians targets carried out by the CIA and blamed on Cuba in 1962. Thankfully JFK said duck no and shut that shit down. Apparently, JFK even demoted the guy who proposed this on the spot. Thank God. Also, this means that this idea had to go through a long chain of command with many high-ranking people in the government agreeing to it. This is why many people believe in a 9/11 conspiracy. It surely wasn't the only time a plan of that nature was drafted. I've never been one to push the 9/11 was an inside job conspiracy, but I've met and heard enough people who reject it solely because the government would never do something like that, which is baffling to anyone who knows the least little bit about history. Life is cheap compared to money and power. MK Ultra. The CIA performing illegal experiments on Americans to try to develop mind control. MK Ultra was never declassified. It was leaked, and the CIA destroyed all documents surrounding it. As all good governments should, just in case. And they let a Canadian doctor molest kids as part of it. I knew some of the stuff that happened, but damn, this is way too much. If I recall correctly, they would let some powerful rich pedos abuse kids, then blackmail them with the pictures to receive funds. Gay bomb. It was a weapon speculated by the USA in the 90s that, when dropped, would release pheromones which would make the enemy attracted to each other. Edit. Spelling. I love the idea that the enemy would just stop fighting a war and get their duck on. I mean, shouldn't we all at least give it a try? Forgive the stupid question. But is there any evidence that something like this could actually work? Is there a good, reliable place to read about this? I'm actually curious. From what I understand, it wouldn't do anything as humans are very much not pheromone based, so at most it would confuse them as to what they got hit with, why there is a strong musky smell from it. Sarge, why does no man's land smell like Axe body spray? Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was subjected to grueling, degrading psychological experiments while he was an underage student at Harvard. Wasn't he an MK Ultra? Law enforcement officials of Reddit, what is the most obscure law you've ever had to enforce, and how did it happen? Not a cop, but saw this dude get arrested for the most bizarre thing I'll ever witness. My buddies have a small cottage on a lake in western Michigan, and everyone knows you don't mess with the police on the lake, because those guys can be in the water on sea deuce within like 5 minutes after you call. We are sitting out on the dock, and we saw mama duck and a line of ducklings swim past us. They get about 20 or so feet out into the lake past the dock, and this dude rolls up on a jet ski, pulls out a fucking revolver, and caps mama duck. This is a violation of like every hunting and public safety law there is, so we run up to the house and tell our parents, and the police are called. We get back down to the dock with armed dads in tow, and Daddy Duck is swimming out to the distraught ducklings just as Jackass is rolling back up. My friend's dad yells something at him, and the dude, turns out he was very drunk, yells something offensive back, and bam, pops Daddy Duck right in front of 2 county sheriffs. They managed to arrest him without much brouhaha, but odds are that dude got hit with an amazing fine, lost his driver's license, and probably did some jail time. Tonight on 24-Hour News 8, a man was arrested today after shooting 2 ducks with a revolver on a jet ski while drunk. Honking your horn in the absence of danger. A motorcycle cop cut me off as I was entering the freeway once with no siren. I didn't recognize he was a cop as it was dark, so I slammed on my horn and he immediately pulled me over. He said that the horn was too late after the instance of danger. Got a ticket, and to tack onto that, because he smelled weed, I was handcuffed on the side of the freeway while he waited for backup to help search my vehicle. Had to stand there for nearly an hour in heels. My feet really hurt. There was no weed. The Canadian Criminal Code has a section prohibiting the obstruction of an officiating clergyman. I came across an instance of someone being disruptive, rude and confrontational inside a Catholic church during mass. I arrested the individual and came across S-176 of the CCC. I had to obtain a statement from the father, proof of his divinity, and confirm that mass was going on. I charged the person, but ultimately the charges were dropped. I was gently reminded that some of our criminal code is outdated and not applicable anymore. In New Jersey there are very specific laws regulating the size of stop signs on ice cream trucks. I'm not a law enforcement officer, but a legislative aide for a state representative. A few weeks ago a very angry middle-aged man called the office complaining about the ice cream truck parked down the street from his house. At first I thought he was kidding, but then he started citing NJ Statute 39:4-128.5, laying out how big an ice cream truck stop sign must be, and how far it must extend off of the truck. I called the local police department, and after assuring them I was not a prank caller, and that I did work for the senator, they said they would assign someone to the case. I got a call 2 days later saying they went down to the ice cream truck with measuring tape and sure enough the stop sign was not regulation size. The ice cream truck was cited, fined, and given a week to get a new stop sign. I'm not sure who calls the police or their senator's office about this type of stuff, but I have a funny feeling that this angry old guy was a competing ice cream man. Not a cop, but a former roommate was when I went to grad school near Amish country. BUI, buddying under the influence, is apparently a thing. It turns out that an insignificant number of Amish get drunk and then let the horse go home because it knows the way. The thing is, the horse doesn't know about stop signs, traffic signals, the speed to go, etc. I'm not a cop, that I was hiking a really scenic trail in Alaska when I encountered some idiot with a chainsaw cutting down giant old growth spruce trees from alongside the trail and hauling them back to his rusty pickup truck that was parked at the trailhead. I called the police non-emergency number. They take this shit seriously in Ack, and the cops were there within minutes with sirens blazing. He got a citation for illegal wood cutting in a national forest, and he had to pay a fine that was in the thousands. He even got his dumb face in the paper with a short write-up of his crime. Shit, I don't even remember the exact wording on the law. Something like assault by bodily excretions or something. I had to look it up. Basically, the guy peed on me, on purpose, while we were trying to arrest him. He also got charged with assault on an officer when he decided pee wasn't working, and resisting, as well as the original trespassing charge that brought us to him in the first place. There's also a legend in my department where an officer needed a reason to chase a guy that he knew to be a felon who carried a gun. So when he caught him, he charged him with firearm by felon and running without a reflective vest at night, which is an actual city ordinance. No, it didn't stick. Edit, the firearm by felon and running without a vest charges didn't stick. My charges did. One time my grandfather got a ticket for riding a horse without a lantern. Local cop and him weren't on good terms, and he was going to a friend's to get drunk, so he rode his horse instead of driving. On his way home, at night, he said the cop stopped him, and because he couldn't cite him for being drunk, he wrote him up for riding a horse without a lantern. Edit, so to clear some things up, keep in mind that my grandpa is 80, so this had to be about 60 years ago that this happened. I don't know what the laws were back then. Also, it was 60 years ago. Grandpa's memory can be a little bit fuzzy on the exact details, but this is a story as I heard it. My dad also attested to the fact that my grandpa did indeed get a ticket for riding a horse without a lantern. In Kennesaw, Georgia, there is a law that states that all home owners must own a gun. I'm curious to hear if anyone has gotten in trouble for that one. I live there. Most definitely not enforced, and it's not like there would be a way to anyhow. Live in a small rural town. You'd be surprised how many dwees while driving a tractor/lawnmower we give out. And no, we don't write these tickets if we see them mowing their yard with a beer. These people drive this stuff into town to the gas station, Walmart, and other places with beer in hands because they think we can't write them a dwee. My neighbor is an amateur radio. One day he calls me sounding pissed, asking if I had installed any new electronic devices recently. I didn't, so I said no without knowing what was the problem. 1 week later, some technicians from the National Communication Department were knocking at my door handling lots of weird detectors and asking if they could visit my house because a complaint about illegal use of a certain frequencies had been filed against me. They tried every room in the house before finally finding the source. One LED light bulb was apparently sounding weird. They told me to change it, but didn't find me. I've heard about this over in England. A guy caused interference on several bands when he opened and closed the fridge door in his garage. We have the High Hedges Act 2011 in this country. A guy phones up the council complaining that his neighbor's hedges were blocking light into his living room. Fun thing about this law is it only applies when the hedge is 2 meters, 6 feet 6 inches tall or over. We can't force anyone to trim the hedge below said height. We charge him some silly amount, up to £360, can't remember exactly, for the privilege of coming out to look, see the hedge is blocking light, go to the neighbor and tell him to trim the hedge down, or we'll have to serve a notice. The neighbor cuts the hedge down to 2 meters and it still blocks light into the room. We can't do anything more. This happens far more than it should. What are some of the worst examples of the "we've always done it that way" insert? I'm a pediatric resident, working with archaic old attending doctors who enforced decisions based on how it was done back in the day rather than data supported and evidence-based medicine. I can't stand working with these sorts of people. Maybe not the worst, but I think this story is worth sharing. Banana farmer Doug takes his future son-in-law and my friend Jim out to pick bananas. Bananas are grown on steep slopes around here with roads winding back and forth up the hill. So Doug parks the truck at the top, walks down the hill and starts cutting bunches that weigh 45 kilograms, and then hauls them back up the hill to the truck. Jim takes one look at this setup and says, why don't we park the truck at the bottom of the hill and start picking there, so we are carrying the bananas down the hill instead of up. Then we can move the truck up the rows as we go, because we always do it this way, is the reply. So Jim says, humor me. Let's try it my way, just for today. Doug reluctantly agrees. End of the day comes, bananas are picked, and they're back at the house enjoying a cold beer. Doug says, you know what, Jim? Your way was a lot easier. I just started a new job at a small clinic and absolutely everything they have is analog. Their contacts are in a Rolodex and nowhere else. Old files take up an entire garage behind the clinic. The schedule, handled by individual clinicians, even though most patients see at least 2 therapists when they come, has to be handwritten week by week. All notes are handwritten. It's driving me crazy. Banks not transferring money in weekends. This is because in the old days, without internet and such, the money transfers were done by hand, but now it is done by computers. The only reason it still happens is that one of the banks has the money and get interest over it in those weekends. I'm an American living in South Korea, and when I first moved here, I found I could deposit money in an ATM any day of the week, and it was immediately available in my bank account. Same goes for people transferring money to you from their account. I was floored. My boss will insist we do things his way, because that's the way he did it before he had any employees and that's what worked for him. However, we keep having to lull him into letting us do things our way, because his way was just slowing down and hurting our business. He's seen the progress we've made, mostly the money, but also customer sat, and when he's not there on Saturday we are able to get more work done and money in a day than this guy will do in a week, because of how efficient we are. We work on cars. You put empty boxes here in the empty box area. When the area fills up, you move all the boxes over to the box flattening area on the other side of the warehouse and flatten them there. After that, you bring the flattened boxes back across the warehouse and leave them in the flattened box area next to the empty box area. Why don't we just flatten the boxes here, so we aren't spending time hauling things across the warehouse several times? What? Why would you do that when we have a designated box flattening area? Why not designate a new area that's closer? Question mark? Because the area is over there. If I see you flattening boxes out of the box flattening area, you're fired.
Hey guys, we just wanted to thank you for your continued support. Behind the robot voice, we are real people that are working hard to achieve our goals. Please like, subscribe and interact with our videos. It means the world to us. Thanks, the Reddit Rogue team.
I work in a restaurant, and one night, I went to clean the soda nozzle on the fountain. I removed the one for lemonade/water, and it broke a boss's mind. He said we leave that one on overnight. I know, I'm just gonna give it a little scrub and hook it back up. In case someone wants water, we have a porter who cleans the place. The busser thought I was trying to deny this guy a glass of water. It can be reattached. I'm going to clean it and reattach it within 90 seconds. It just needs to be cleaned every once in a while. He looked like his fucking heart was broken. Restaurant workers are extremely susceptible to microchosmal thinking. Felt bad for the guy. Fucked his shit up. In several academic fields there's a culture of older, more experienced people acting shitty towards their younger subordinates, and the younger people just having to take it, because the older people have all the power. Eventually the younger people grow older and end up being shitty to their subordinates, because in their view they've served their time. This will never end until the people with the power stop being assholes. Yes. Minor example, was at a conference recently, and during my talk, the old eccentric interrupted me a few minutes in, about something not about my research, really rudely. I was taken aback, as were the younger folks present, but it was amazing how many old guys just shrugged and said I've known him 20 years, and that's just how he is. Old dude did apologize for how I took it, which I always take as an apology, but it was pretty absurd that I was not supposed to be pissed that an old man I didn't know insulted me in front of the entire conference for no reason. Job I was in would handwrite patient notes, type them up, then print them again, only to file them. I suggested typing them from the get-go as everyone had laptops anyway, and then attaching the digital notes to the patient profile on our global drive. Once all existing notes were archived, we went from having 10 on-site filing cabinets to half a cabinet. People are technophobic. Joining a work environment and making suggestions to coworkers who have been doing the job for 40+ years. Some appreciate learning of an alternative way of working, while some get all huffed up about learning something new that would increase their productivity. Next time, don't ask me how I do my work faster than. When I worked at the camp front desk we had a really shitty system. It was sort of okay for checking people in, but for everything else it was just horrible. Even checkouts were a chore to do. Anyway, I was thought that I need to search for the parcel number, let's say 202. I had to scroll down to 202, right click on it, choose check and guess, then press F4, tab, and then I could check people in. I soon figured out that I can type the parcel number by keyboard, and if pressing enter, it jumped straight to check-in page. No F4s or tabs. So that's what I did, and told everyone of the new way, until that one guy said, that screws up the process, that by doing it my way it can mess with everything else, and blamed me for some mistake that was made by him at the checkout. Like I said, even checkout was a chore, and you had to be really careful when doing it, otherwise you could mess things up, which he did. He told the boss about it, and we had to go back to left clicking and whatnot. Nobody did it, of course, because it was time consuming. I have two coworkers, our admins, who print an email and scan it back to themselves as a PDF. Yes, I've shown them how to save the original digital file as a PDF. Yes, they keep printing and scanning. One of my coworkers always says she's not a computer person. I love that. The technology that all modern businesses run off, and you don't do it. You're very useful. I hate that mindset. It's basically saying I'm bad at this large aspect of my job, so now it's everyone else's responsibility to do it for me. Haha. I have one coworker who is unable to call into conference calls on her own. This is not a computer Skype call. She literally can't figure out how to dial a phone number, and somehow this is still acceptable behavior. Someone has to come in and call the number for her every time. Boy, girl seating. I work in a preschool, and this older woman constantly insists on children sitting this way. Even when she walks into the middle of a lunch that she's not catering, she'll make kids stop eating, stand up, and move them around, just so they're sitting. Boy, girl. I honestly can't see any reason to use it. The rules for billiards on a given day seem to depend on who I'm playing, because that's the way they've always played. Monopoly is the same shit. Dressing all your soldiers in bright red trousers, lining them up in parade ground formation, and marching toward the enemy lines. Here's looking at you, France in 1914. Or choosing commanders based on birth over skill. Looking at you, Austria-Hungary. To be fair, it's hard to be a commander if you haven't gone through birth. The most profound example of this in my life was when a coworker received a food order via text from another coworker, but I was the one ordering the food, so I asked her to copy and paste it to me, but instead she calls me while I'm driving and gives me 3 people's orders. I ask her to copy and paste a text or forward it to me because I won't remember all the orders, but she insists that I write it down while I'm driving, which I did not do. She still to this day refuses to learn how to copy and paste or forward texts. There is no reason for a cashier's should always stand rule. It's based on outdated tradition and not much in the way of practically. My most recent job was as a developer at a small software company. When I started there was no source control. The programmers would sit behind a computer and compare their code line by line with a file compare tool. When I brought up that there was a tool to fix this, they didn't trust it. We don't want to change how we do things just because it's easier. You have a message from the traditional man. Like and subscribe to not deal with me. I work with contracts. I have a coworker who refuses to review them on her screen. So she prints out several 20 to 50 page documents per day, reviews them manually, and tosses them in the recycle bin. She probably goes through 1 to 2 reams of paper a week. I tried to explain to her that you can review them without printing them off, but that's the way I has always done it. So for all that work that you do every day to try and recycle and be responsible, she is out here making enough waste to make up for it. Every year our town throws someone named Ted into a lake. What town? And why? And is it the same Ted every year? Or do they randomly pick another Ted every year? How many Teds does your town have? It's because of an old tradition of dumping tea into the lake in celebration of the Boston Tea Party. But the original document was handwritten, and tea kind of looks like Ted, so it's a tradition to find the nearest Ted and throw him in. It's silly but gives our town its charm. It's funny to see so many people from my hometown chime in. What up, Pawnee? The college lecture format. Most professors teach that way because it's how they learned and it was good enough for them. But there's a surprising amount of research going on about how to actually effectively teach, and people who do such research, including Nobel laureate in physics Cole Weeman, have compared that teaching method to bloodletting as a medical treatment. That is to say, any benefit from it is purely coincidental. I agree, but I'll say this. Alternative methods such as small group work require a level of investment from students that just doesn't occur in some classes. For example, some of my grad school friends teach college algebra. Yes, algebra, in college. A lot of those L students aren't invested in learning math, they just want to take care of their math credits and get out. Unsurprisingly, the friend that does more lecture has had the best grade averages. Don't work too hard / fast. You'll make us look bad mentality. If I finish my work then let me chill. If there's more work then give me that shit. I'm not turning a screw for 10 minutes. If you manage to process 500 units in one day, management will expect you to do that every damn day forever. And God forbid you hit 550 units. Management is an unrelenting evil monster. Daylight savings time causes a huge uptick in accidents every spring and serves no real function for tons of the population in the US anymore, but we still do it. Daylight savings is my bane cause event, though I'm in a zone where it isn't altered. Everyone read the 80% of the retirees in the Duggan family traditions changes it, then blame me when I'm late for the 2 p.m. meeting cause I showed up at the correct time according to my phone's updated time. r/AskReddit. What is the laziest thing you've ever done? I have a dog and a cat, and I hate sleeping with the door open. Sometimes dog wants to sleep in the bedroom. Sometimes dog wants to sleep outside the bedroom, but he never decides until I'm comfy in bed. Solution? Keep a laser pointer on my nightstand. Once dog decides where he's sleeping, I'll shine the laser pointer on the door so that my cat paws it closed. It has now become a routine that my cat will wait by the door for the laser before laying down. Genius. Always give the hardest task to the laziest person, because they'll figure out the easiest way to do it. Somebody, somewhere, sometime. Seriously, it's things like this that just prove it right. I was laying in bed with the light on and wanted to go to sleep with it off. I called my house from my cell phone and asked for myself in a disguised voice. When my mom came in to bring me the phone, I asked her to turn the light out when she left, hung up both phones and went to sleep. How are you not a supervillain yet? That was so evil and genius. You ducking legend. I like to imagine you didn't go for a normal voice and settled for a Nigerian Prince twang. Late to the party, but this one is too good to pass up. I was once on a US military ship, having breakfast in the wardroom, officer's lounge, when the operations officer, ops, walks in. This guy was the definition of not a morning person. He's still half asleep, bleary-eyed, basically a zombie with a bagel. He sits down across from me to eat his bagel and is just barely conscious. My back is to the outboard side of the ship, and the morning sun is blazing in one of the portholes, putting a big bright ass circle of light right on his barely conscious face. He's squinting and chewing and basically just remembering how to be alive for today. It's painful to watch, but then Zombie Ops stops chewing, slowly picks up the phone, and dials the bridge. In his well-known "I'm still totally asleep" voice, he says, "Hi, it's Ops. Could you shift our barput?" "Yep, 165. Thanks," and puts the phone down. And then he just sits there, squinting, waiting, and then, ever so slowly, I realize that that big blazing spot of sun has begun to slide off the zombie's face and onto the wall behind him. After a moment it clears his face and he blinks slowly a few times, and the brilliant beauty of what I've just witnessed begins to overwhelm me. By ordering the bridge to adjust the ship's back and forth patrol by about 15 degrees, he's changed our course just enough to reposition the sun off of his face. He's literally just redirected thousands of tons of steel and hundreds of people so that he could get the sun out of his eyes while he eats his bagel. I am in awe. He slowly picks up his bagel, and for a moment I'm terrified at the thought that his own genius may escape him. That he may never appreciate the epic brilliance of his laziness, since he's not going to wake up for another hour. But between his next bites he pauses, looks at me, and gives me the faintest, sly grin, before returning to gnaw slowly on his zombie bagel. I think this is one of the greatest things I have ever read. Sometimes, oh so rarely, at a place you least expect it, you read something truly, mind-bogglingly, glorious. Tupper Wolf. That was beautifully executed. But dude, be honest, you've probably told that story to so many people by now you have it down to the syllable and the exact length of the dramatic pauses. Sailors love to tell sea stories. In order to not walk 5 feet to my bed, I decided to fall asleep on my recliner, pulling down the window shade a little extra, so I could use it as a blanket. Shot 10 Nerf darts at my light switch, from bed, missed all of them and slept with the lights on. Solution: if you never turn the lights on, you don't have to turn them off. I once laid in bed so long, they turned the lights off for me by non-payment of the bill. Are you now fused to the bed? I tried the same but with one shoe at the switch, missed, second shoe at the bulb, glass everywhere. I always heat things in the microwave for 111 or 222 because I'm too lazy to move my fingers to the 0 before I hit start. My roommate and I arranged our dorm room to be lazy capable. One person was able to reach the mini fridge and light switch from her bed, and the other could reach to the window and AC heat from her bed. We never fought again. I remember my freshman year my neighbor, and later to be roommate, made an intricate system of strings and counterweights so he could pull a string from his bunk and kill the lights. Edit. Forgot some words. We did this to close the windows in the morning. Used a bottle of detergent as a counterweight. Eventually there was a big mess. Used to have one of those clap on, clap off lights in my room. I hated clapping, so I just made an audio recording of me clapping and mapped it to one of the programmable keys on my keyboard. I hated clapping. I didn't even know that could be a thing. Either way, that's funny. Whoa, that is really lazy. Spent a half hour searching for a torrent to download a textbook that I had left in another room. Called my mom's office line from the living room to ask her a question. She has a home office. Me and my siblings used to text each other on the phone, using Nokia 3390s, not the smartphones of today, when we were just a room away. Heck, the walls were so thin, if someone left their phone on outside profile you can hear their SMS tone, and if someone didn't answer right away, we'd usually yell. Haha, I feel better now. When I lived at home, I called my house phone a few times using my cell phone from my bed to ask my mom/dad to come close my door or turn off the lights in my room or to tell them to be quieter cause I wanted to sleep. This is how heart disease starts, kids. Washed bed sheets. Didn't put the sheets on till 2 months later. Had the pizza guy deliver a pizza. I lived above the pizzeria. Here are a couple. Roommate was on the other side of the apartment, maybe 20 feet away, and we're both using our computers. Sent him an instant message to find out what he was doing and if he wanted to go grab some lunch. Came home and tripped in the doorway, falling flat on the floor. I kicked the door shut with my foot and fell asleep for 3 hours. I was drunk one night and decided the bathroom was too far away, so I pissed in my cat's litter box. Didn't feel like cleaning it up in the morning, so I just threw the whole litter box in the garbage. I downloaded a movie instead of going upstairs to grab the DVD. And the movie was? The Avengers. It's on Netflix. You could have taken it to the next level. I didn't want to get up to get scissors to open a package I had, so I grabbed the cat and used his claws. It was soft plastic and the cat was indifferent. The cat was indifferent, just as lazy. FTFY. Eating my food directly from the pot to eliminate dishes. I hate washing dishes. I do this too when I am the only one at home. Sometimes I might even eat with the ladle and stuff. Sigh. An update is available. Ask me in 4 hours. Ask me in 4 hours. Ask me in 4 hours. God damn it. Ask me in 1 day. I tried to skip to the good part of a 33-second YouTube video. I tried to skip to the good part of a Vine. I ran out of clean bowls for cereal, so I lined the bowls with foil over the old food and made a bowl of cereal. After that I threw away the foil and did it again the next day. I was out of the country for a few weeks, and the morning I came back, I saw my boyfriend eating cereal out of a measuring cup with a plastic spoon. I can never leave again. Reminds me of black books. I am currently eating scrambled eggs with a comb from a shoe. Edit Rock Me Amadeus is right. I put baked beans originally. In college, we hooked up those hamster water bottles to our headboards with a wire so that we could drink from them when hungover. It enabled us to just open our mouth instead of having to move any other part of our body. We didn't get much water out of it. Edit. Link. You need to get a Camelback. I'd give you a link but I'm too lazy. Called the restaurant to send the waiter back to my table. This is just genius. So many geniuses in this thread. Masters of efficiency. Why the hell isn't there a flag system at restaurants? Every table gets 2 flags and a flag stand. 1 flag is red, 1 is green. If you need something, you put up the red flag. If you want to be left alone and enjoy your goddamn meal without your conversation being interrupted, you put up the green flag. It makes everyone's life easier. Sometime just please do this. I don't care if you take credit for this brilliant idea. Just make it happen. Japanese diners just have a button you can press, and somewhere in the restaurant there's a ding and your table number appears to alert the waitstaff that you want someone to come to you. It's super nice. I was in a class called OJT, on the job training, in high school. Every day the last 25% of school was dedicated to me being able to leave class to go to work. We were given grades by our employers which would then turn into grades for the class. As a high school senior I convinced the teacher that oversaw this program that because I had my own corporation that I used to sell stuff on eBay I should be able to be my own boss. She agreed. I failed that class because I didn't bother to fill out the paperwork to give myself a grade. Holy shit, guy. My roommate in college went home for a 3-day weekend, and I stayed in bed the entire time. I got up twice to pee, and brought 4 bags of sour cream and onion potato chips to bed with me. She walked in on Monday at 9 PM, laughed so hard she cried, and forced me to get in the shower. You peed twice in 3 days? That sounds really unhealthy. This thread is making me feel a little better about my life choices. When I was in college I ordered pizza for delivery because I wanted cigarettes and asked if there was a driver there that would pick me up some cigs for an extra $10 on top of his normal tip. We had a Circle K next door to my apartment complex I could see from my window. The cigs cost me $33. This reminded me of a time when I ordered a cab to get cigarettes. It had just snowed and I hadn't shoveled the snow off my car yet. There's this gas station about 3 blocks away but I was too lazy and cold to walk. So I ordered a cab to drive me to the gas station and wait and then bring me home. He looked at me like I was nuts. TV remote was 2 feet out of reach, so I downloaded the remote control app instead. Edit. My particular cable provider has an app that works with their cable box, so it was their proprietary app. Been there myself. Now I wonder what I'd do if my smartphone were out of reach. Download girlfriend app. Nah, too many microtransactions. Ain't nothing micro about those transactions. I couldn't be bothered replacing the batteries in my wireless mouse, so I downloaded a mouse app for my phone. That was 2 months ago. I still haven't changed those batteries. Eating a microwavable meal in bed. I got it all over. I then took off my sock to use as a napkin. We would be good friends. You two would be too lazy to ever hang out with each other. Threw a shoe to knock over the cat food bag so I didn't have to go all the way into the garage to open it and dump it into the bowl. I lost 14 pounds because I didn't feel like eating. I know a guy who accidentally went on a raw vegan diet because he just couldn't be bothered cooking. Just spent half the year munching on carrots and apples like a spoiled pony. Haven't eaten for 3 days cause didn't feel like cooking and lacked money to order food. I have a feeling that could be unhealthy. But at least he paid the internet bill, right? For me, internet, food. I just realized I have a problem. If anyone asks, there are cookies in the browser. Not me, but a buddy of mine was laying in bed one morning, picked his nose and had nowhere to put it back in his nose. Who throws gold back in the mine? Attached my dog's leash to my RC monster truck car and walked her around the cul-de-sac with it, all from the comfort of my living room. Don't judge. You must have a tiny dog. Or a big RC car. U/Reddit's one true god is Grant O'Mahara from Mythbusters. His remote control car is a Honda Civic. There's a nail that's directly behind my head that I hit every day. It's been there for over a year. Try to nail it in with your head. Drove to class. Escalators up to 3rd floor classroom were broken. Went home. That happened to me one time at the gym. Figured I'd grab a donut and try again next month. Escalators can never break. They can only turn into stairs. Sorry for the convenience. I've been sitting on the toilet for 45 minutes cause I don't want to pull my pants up. Edit. Apparently a lot of people think this is gonna give me hemorrhoids. Well, I hope that you're wrong, but I want to assure everyone that at the moment my ass is okay. I woke up about 30 minutes late and called in sick to work instead of rushing to get ready for the day. This happens to me way too often. The real winners will be too lazy to log on and write in this thread. Oh. My TV was on my dresser and I didn't have a remote. I had turned off Netflix in an effort to go to bed. I decided a few minutes later that sleep is for the weak and decided for more Netflix. I never got up to turn my TV back on though. I watched hours of Netflix on my tiny phone to avoid getting up for 5 seconds. I once hooked up with a guy on Grindr and made him go past the grocery store to get me some milk on the way to my place. I didn't even really feel like sex, but I sure did feel like cereal. Sexual favors for cereal? Sounds about right. My husband did this but I took advantage, so I'm guilty too. We were in his man cave attached to the garage. It's about 100 feet from the house. Using his cell he called the house phone. One of the kids answered and he told him to come to the cave. When he got there my husband told him to grab a beer out of the fridge that was about 10 feet away. I said, while you're there, grab me a soda. I feel so ashamed. I grew up before cell phones, so my dad's preferred method was to yell in my general direction, and when I came over ask me if I was going to the kitchen. Regardless of the answer, he would say do me a favor, and go get me a soda, chips, whatever, and ask your mother if she wants anything. I'm in my 30s and though I moved out years ago, every time I visit he does the exact same thing, and I always go after asking mom if she wants anything, and we laugh about it every time. Worth it? Of course. Scratch my ass by farting. I only needed to wipe one more time and was out of TP. I used the brown roll from the inside. I had BBQ sauce on my cheek at a restaurant. Rather than get up to grab a napkin, I used a piece of bread to wipe it off and then ate it. That's also the fattest thing I've done. That's not being lazy. That's being smart. Today I learned I'm actually not that lazy. Seriously, I never thought I'd say this, but I feel like a responsible, practical, and reasonably hardworking person right now. Fell asleep wearing full makeup, woke up, wore the same makeup the next day. I hate you all not having horrible raccoon eyes in the morning, yet admire you all at the same time. Asked a friend to FaceTime me the Miss Universe pageant as she was watching it at home and I was in bed and the TV was downstairs. I was a month and a half late for my birth. Open up my window and pissed out on the roof rather than walk all the way to the bathroom. What's the richest thing someone has done in front of you? We had dinner, and afterwards, his dad decided we needed some entertainment. So, he got on the phone, and around 15 minutes later, a Spanish guitarist and a flamenco dancer show up and put on a show for us. I realize that's not as showy or ostentatious as casually tossing handfuls of money to a waiter or valet, or things of that nature. However, the idea that he would casually drop hundreds of dollars for a private show just on a whim illustrates just how little money really meant to him. His dad was very laid back. He usually drove an old pickup, and always wore jeans and cowboy boots, and usually a flannel work shirt. To look at him, you'd never guess how wealthy he was. I work at a tennis club with a few well-to-do folks. This one guy and his wife came up, and we got off on the worst foot. He rudely complained about the steak he ordered, and was just kind of an all-around jerk. Not long after that, they come back. He must have realized his actions and felt bad because he came up, asked my name and shook my hand, and asked if I could deliver a couple drinks for him and his wife at the pool. When I did, he shoved a 20 in my hand, and every time I delivered drinks after that, I think he gave me $80 over the course of the night. He comes to the register to close his bill, and he says thanks for all your hard work, and slips another bill in my hand, but this time it's a 100. I told him that I couldn't take. He's filled my pockets enough already. Seriously, it's fine. I could tell he was distraught enough that he wanted to make up for his behavior before, and it seemed he felt money was the only way to do it. And I'm sure to him tipping me close to $200 was nothing. The look of dejection on his face when I turned down the 100 was something I hadn't seen before. Since then he has succeeded in slipping me a 100 a couple other times without me noticing. I feel bad because all I care about is that he just treat me like a human. I don't like just taking other people's money, especially as some form of recompense.
Hey guys, we just wanted to thank you for your continued support. Behind the robot voice, we are real people that are working hard to achieve our goals. Please like, subscribe and interact with our videos. It means the world to us. Thanks, the Reddit Rogue team.
Place a $5 million bet on a single hand of baccarat, proceed to lose, and not even bat an eye. Meanwhile I decided not to buy ice cream, so I can save some money. A rich woman had a flat tire and didn't know how to fix it, so I pull over to help her. When I was done we got talking, and whoops, she so happened to drop her wallet and it landed at my feet. She said keep it. I felt so bad, I said no I can't. She insisted. See, I get home and the wallet. $987 was in there with ungodly amounts of change. This was last month as well. That $987 paid off one of my college loans. I will be honest, I cried a little because of this person. She didn't keep any cards in her wallet. She probably has a tip wallet for shit like this or something. Was in a small size little bar for breakfast in SF. In comes a guy who orders the same as I did, pancakes with coffee. We finish around the same time, and I leave my regular 15% tip. Service and the food wasn't special, but whatever, I'm a European, and I know it's their salary basically. But this other guy starts counting his $100 bills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He smiles, shuffles them together, puts his empty cup on top and leaves. His bill was about $20 or something. He paid $1,000. I used to work for a movie theater chain. A long-time employee was getting married and invited the owner. At the wedding he handed the couple an envelope. He asked them to open it then. There was a card and a literal blank check. He told them he wanted to pay for their entire wedding, honeymoon and all. He told them to write whatever it cost on the check and tell his secretary how much it was. When I was in junior high, a kid I'll call Joe the 40H moved in around the corner from me and we got to be friends. His parents were divorced and he lived with his mom, but had regular visits with his dad. What I didn't realize at the time was that the fact that his last name was plastered all over the city, on auditoriums, hospital wings, university buildings, etc., wasn't a coincidence. One day Joe the 4th invited me to go to his dad's house for dinner. His dad lived in a fairly large old Victorian house in a rather upscale area. This was the kind of house that had dumbwaiters and secret passages. It was pretty fun to explore, but I really didn't think much of it. An international student was introducing himself to our group and the professor. The tuition fee for an international student is £21,000. The prof asked him, "How are you handling the tuition fees? What do you think of it?" He replied, "It's pricey, but I can handle it." Prof asked him if he applied for student loans. He deadass replied, "What's a student loan?" with an innocent look on his face. The prof and the other classmates just looked at him with awe. When I worked as a computer tech I went out to a house call. I arrived and realized it should have been called an estate call. The place was senselessly large. I go to this guy's office to look at his computer and I needed a pen for something. He opened his desk drawer and asks me if guns made me uncomfortable because he had one in that same drawer. I respond that I think guns are cool. Mild exaggeration. He proceeds to take me to his gun safe. I'd like this 9x9x9 bank vault. So many guns it was insane. I was obviously impressed. He said, "Oh, you like this stuff? Check out my gun room." I tag along more curious than interested. Then I see a room that dwarfs any other I've seen in a residential building. There were guns, like you wouldn't believe, 50 calibers mounted machine guns, small cannons, like every small arm from the Civil War to modern time. Even as a gun novice I knew enough to be impressed. Shit was crazy. Refurnish an entire house with brand new expensive designer furniture and toss out the old designer furniture on the curb like it was broken down junk. Couches, beds, wardrobes, you name it. The old furniture was only a year old. They'd purchased it all brand new the year before. I have a buddy in the service industry, so he is in people's homes pretty much daily. He's also a talkative person and generally really likable. Every 6 months or so, he'll call me over and show off some new piece of furniture he got for free. He's gotten a 2-year-old washer and dryer set, a 60-inch TV, a leather massage chair, a new pub height kitchen table and a patio set. All this stuff is super nice and barely looks like it was used. He says people oftentimes will just give shit away just so they don't have to bother with the hassle of figuring out how to get rid of it. I finally got this amazing, beautiful Lego 6990 monorail transport system that I had been wanting for years. Go to rich friend's house. I see some pieces. He has it too. Let's build it. No, the pieces, they're all mixed in with the others. So let's pick them out, right? No, it'll take hours quicker to have them made. Just go buy a new set. And she did. She went out and bought 2 Lego space monorails plus a few other sets to fill it out. My friend summoned with a wave of his hand more Lego than I could hope for in years. He gave orders to an adult. I was astonished. I worked on a 124-foot yacht and went to look, and another yacht he was interested in buying that was stored and owned by the shipyard. The broker was being a real dick, so we just walked off, but he really wanted this classic, and he called the yard owner. After not getting much help, he calls his legal team tells them to buy the whole freaking yard. 2 weeks later and he and his team took possession of the yard, his new yacht, Trumpy, and several others. Told me to come with him for the management meeting and fired the frick out of the broker. I got my first real captain's job out of the deal. Solved a minor inconvenience by buying a truck. I was loading my car after a Home Depot trip and a few spots over was a couple who just bought several large bags of mulch. Well, they couldn't fit all their mulch in their E-Class Mercedes, so the wife told the husband to go to the car dealership across the street and buy a truck. And that's exactly what the husband did. He walked across the street to a Toyota dealership and bought the first used truck he saw to move the mulch. A long time ago, I worked at a security at a casino. I remember once watching a man bet $15k, $5k chips, a hand at blackjack and lose literally every hand without any reaction whatsoever. He probably lost $60k in the 5 minutes I sat watching him. Also, there used to be an elderly guy who would come in and have the entire section of the high roller slot machines reserved for himself. He'd spend 10 or 12 hours going down each row pulling handles at between $100 and $500 a spin. He would usually give advance notice that he was coming, and there would be servers and attendants specifically assigned to him while he was there. This always humbled me. When I think I have some money, there's always someone in Vegas dropping your entire yearly salary on a hand of blackjack. Unless you're in the 1%. Buy a brand new $60,000 BMW without hesitation. He was a Saudi dude I was tutoring in English, and he needed a car. So he just bought one with the same attitude that one would have when buying a gas station sandwich. People with that kind of money are just living in another reality. Saudi guy I know from university got something like $200,000 a month from his family. Unbelievable wealth in that country. I saw someone crash a Lamborghini and 10 minutes later a driver showed up with a Ferrari and buddy drove off while his driver waited for the tow truck. How rich do you have to be to have someone on call to bring you a new luxury car when you're in an accident? So one of my bullshit jobs in college was doing door-to-door pamphlet bombing and collecting donations for environmental initiatives in the SF Bay Area. Normally, it's all volunteer stuff, but this time they were hiring people as it was an election year. Normally, it's a goal of $30-50 per day for each person. This girl, who had done this for a year, partnered with me, and she was just such a nice girl, but no one was donating despite her charm. I did a few, and fared no better. Finally, I knocked on a door and a dude comes out. I did the script kind of half-assed, mainly because I was impressed by his sound system in his living room that I had peaked. He showed it off to us, offered us a drink, and went off to get his checkbook. He comes back with his wife, and she was like, "Ooh, let me get my checkbook too." The guy asked us what we normally get per week for this, and the girl I was with told him on a good week, around $200-250. The guy makes a face and was like, "Nah, that can't be right," and hands us a check for $5,000. Then his wife shows up and was like, "You did 5. I'll do 6, and gave us another check, but for $6,000. I went to my boss' wedding. The whole thing was just so damn decadent. There were over 1,000 ppl, a big ass film crane, high budget Bollywood music videos produced of the bride and groom driving luxury cars, multiple wedding cakes, etc. What made me pause though, was when freaking $5-10 sign bills started raining from the sky and the guests danced on them. The bills were American. I'm in Canada, too. I tried to be low-key and grab some, but my GF said it'd look bad as everyone else, sporting expensive-looking suits and saris, were ignoring them. Understandably, I was achieved when I asked for a raise soon after, and I was told the company wasn't making enough to justify what I wanted. We were speechless and my partner started to cry. The guy also asked us to give him a call by the end of the week so he can follow up with our efforts. I found out later that he was a retired music producer who was super loaded but lived in a normal looking house outside of Oakland. crazy stuff. What's the weirdest thing you've done as a result of social anxiety? Oh boy, I was at the mall, not intending to spend much money at all. I was by myself, and I tried to avoid all of those annoying mall salesmen that desperately try to bring you over to their booths. Well, I looked at one of the man, ended up spending over $100 on a nail kit because I was too anxious to say no. My friends think him an idiot. Honestly, I couldn't agree more. A school friend of mine had invited me to a party at his house. The only person I knew there was him and 2 other people from my school I was not at the best of terms with. The party was taking place at the roof of his house, and it had an open setup with a small room which contained a bed and a TV. I was tasked with bringing a console for the party and setting it up in that room. When I went in, I realized that the TV can't be connected due to lack of an HDMI port. However, at that moment, I heard music and hooting. The worst of my fears had come true. People were dancing in a circle and everyone was being pushed into it one by one. So, naturally I stayed in that small room for the remainder of the party. Around 1.5 hours. When entering a public restroom, if there already happens to be somebody in there, I'll wash my hands uselessly until they leave. If somebody else walks in before, or just as they leave, I generally decide I don't really need to be there and live that stomach busting hell until I can find another restroom to start the process all over again. When I started high school, I used to hide behind a vending machine during lunch because I didn't know anyone. A few days later, I noticed someone else hiding behind the vending machine right across from me. We became friends shortly after. Asked a worker in the mall for assistance the other day. She looked at me really weird and said she didn't work there. I internally freaked out. I said I know and asked if she could still help. She agreed and turned around to walk in the direction I needed help, facing away from me, and I immediately power walked out of there. One time I was leaving a party and I turned my car right instead of left. To avoid looking like an idiot and turning around, I just went with it and ended up in traffic for about 2 hours. In middle school, I'd give lunch money to a friend and ask her to bring my tray to me so I didn't have to walk through the lunchroom. I'd also ask people to take my tray back for me once finished eating. Even worse than that, in 3rd grade I got super nervous when people would see me eat. I also had a fear of choking, so I'd only eat ketchup packets. I always loved ketchup, and I guess it was a way to get some sort of salty flavor that reminded me of food without actually eating anything solid. People would give me their ketchup packets and I'd eat like 10 or more at lunchtime, and that was it. If we had something good, I'd sneak it in my pocket, and once back inside the classroom, I'd sneak it into my backpack and eat it at home that day. For some reason, my fear of choking was much smaller at home. I was an odd kid. Thankfully my social anxiety is a pretty small factor in my life now, although anything is small compared to that, I guess. Lol. One time I was with my girlfriend my senior year of high school and we were just cuddling in my room, and I got a really bad anxiety attack, so I went to my bathroom and just sat in there and tried to calm down, and I had to text my parents to go up to my room and tell my girlfriend to go home. Lol, I felt so embarrassed, it was awful. I recently moved to a new city and there's a Subway across the street from my complex. I decided to go there for dinner and wanted to get a footlong for that night and another one for tomorrow. Except I'm a big guy, they wouldn't believe I wouldn't eat them both in one sitting. So being the idiot I ordered one for me and had my phone out pretending to get an order from my brother. Pretty sure they knew. Pretty sure they judged. Joke's on me though, I ate them both in one sitting anyways. Ate 2 meals in a row. I was super hungry and had no self-control, so I ate a meal 1 hour before I met up with friends for supper. Then I felt silly and didn't want to be the only one who didn't order food, so I forced a second meal down. There was a car full of 5 guys on the highway next to me. We were the only 2 cars on the road at the time, going the same speed. One of the guys in the back noticed me, then commented to the other guys to look over too. So, they are talking and laughing and waving, pretending to clench their chests and whatnot. I was so flustered by the attention that I didn't realize that I was slowly drifting my car into their lane until I inadvertently ran them off the road. I'll never forget the looks on their faces as they changed from amusement to sheer terror. It was part, "Is this a joke?" Then, "What the hell is she doing?" mixed with "Oh my god, we are gonna die." I couldn't stop it though. I was no longer in control. My shyness was. Another time, I was coming down the steps at my university when a guy at the bottom of the stairs said loudly to his friend, "Hey, isn't that the girl you're in love with from our class?" So the guys are laughing and looking in my direction, drawing even more attention. I proceeded to turn bright red, get super nervous, and fall down the concrete stairs. Every single one. A friend in high school had a crush on one of the librarians, but was far too awkward to talk to them normally, so he would go through the library and pick out books that he thought would impress her. But once he got to the checkout counter, he'd get all choked up and shy and never get past a year. Not me, but something I saw today and see a lot in general on public transport. Guy gets on the bus, sees that every bench already has 1 person on it. Not a big deal. They're built for 2 people, and while everyone likes their space, we also understand that it's an inevitability that when the bus gets full, it's not a big deal to sit next to a stranger for 10 minutes. Not this guy. Walks the length of the bus to check for an empty, then returns to the middle doorway and chooses to stand there for the entire trip, 40 minutes that I was on. Even when someone got off, he slowly looked at the newly empty bench but remained standing, glancing back at it every so often. I knew exactly what he's thinking. Will people judge me for sitting down on my own now, after standing for so long? Yeah, better stay standing, so it looks intentional, like I want to be standing. No, you idiot, that's what's making me judge you. Just sit down and be comfortable. Literally no one cares. Not even uncommon. I see similar behavior weekly. Edit. For the folks saying but you cared, that's why we are anxious. I only remember this guy because he stuck to the awkward behavior. If he'd just sat down like a normie, I'd have already forgotten him. He created what he was anxious about by being anxious about it. It's like a dog biting you because it can sense you're afraid of being bitten. I'll admit the reason I pick up on this behavior is because I used to suffer from regular anxiety, but I recovered when I progressively realized that 9/10 times it was just me being in my own head causing the problems. Nobody really gives a damn what I'm doing. And 30 seconds after I leave, everyone who saw me has already forgotten I existed. I was in a grad school interview, and I was scheduled to meet with a particular professor for 30 minutes. We ran out of things to talk about after about 20 minutes. I'm not good at making eye contact, but confident people make a lot of eye contact, right? So I continued to make eye contact with the professor for about a minute with no words being said, constantly thinking, don't break eye contact. What should I say? Don't break eye contact. This is horrible. Until I came up with something meaningless to say. Oh, I've got one for this. So first of all, you have to understand my anxiety is super bad. I've gotten much better in the last year, but I'm still not great now. So I was awful back when this happened. A few years ago, I was visiting my GF in college for the weekend. Her first year, I was a senior in high school. Anyways, we'd been having fun that day, getting Slurpees from the neighboring 7-Eleven. Other fun. Wink. As the day went on though, she had class, and I elected to stay in her room and hang. Now, she had a single dorm, but how that works is there's this shared living room thing connecting several individual rooms, so you sorta halfway have roommates, and there's a shared, multi-toilet bathroom connected to the main room too. Anyway, sitting in the room for hours, her art class was really long, I eventually needed to pee. but all of the other occupants were hanging out and talking loudly in the main room. I was way too scared to go through them to the bathroom without my GF, as it felt awkward to have some rando walk through. I tried to wait, but it went on for 2 hours before I couldn't hold it. I freaked out and decided to pee into my empty Slurpee cup, fill it with tissues so it couldn't spill out, put it by my GF's trash, and get rid of it later. That being said, I was beyond embarrassed and really upset, and in my freak out began to cry out of emotional overload and shame. So eventually she comes back to find me on the floor, crying of shame, with a Slurpee cup full of tissues and pee. Luckily she gets it and felt super bad for me, cause she's the greatest. Was in a vitamin store with my cousins, and I was thinking we're just browsing, and we're just perusing, and the guy working the store asked how we were doing, and in total panic I like half screamed we're just bruising with a giant smile on my face. He looked really uncomfortable and shuffled away. I haven't gone back into that store since. r/AskReddit, males of Reddit, when was the absolute worst time you had a random boner? I still remember this story more than a decade later. I was in 7th grade social studies class and I sat next to this girl I had a crush on. I was wearing windbreakers, bad move, and it just came up out of nowhere. 30 seconds later the teacher called on me to write on the board. I had to lie and say I didn't do the homework, get a 0 on the assignment just to save myself from embarrassment. I'm sure he would have understood if I told him after class, but I was in 7th grade and just way too embarrassed. Strapped to a gurney in a pool for a first aid demonstration surrounded by 30 people. The instructor said call a lumberjack, we got wood. I wish I had the presence of mind to make a joke about them standing around in a circle checking out a boy's penis. I think the worst time to have boners is when you really have to pee. It happened most recently last year when I was at a road trip in a neighboring country with my class. I really had to go and eventually I got it. Horrible feeling. Less said uncomfortable. College English class. I was called up to present some project. I tried to hide it. My mushroom tip was clearly visible to the entire class, peeking its way from my belt buckle. It was and still is my worst memory that haunts me all these years later. Funny enough, I'm not the first person on Reddit to tell of this story. Somebody else beat me to it, and I had to read a long description from the point of view of someone else seeing my dick that day in a comment section just like this one. That story of someone else seeing my dick got more karma points than I've ever gotten on a single comment. So good for him, her, I guess. Edit. I don't have a link to this comment. This happened over 7 years ago before I had a Reddit account. I was in high school and we had swimming. I was in Speedos and walking along the edge of the pool when it decided to pitch a tent. Only this tent had no walls. In between me and my towel was a girl I liked who would have seen everything. There was no hiding it. 2 years later I was still too embarrassed to ask her on a date. Interesting that this post is now in rising. I often get boners if I sit for a long time. I was sitting with my wife watching TV, and Richard Simmons came on. She felt my boner and got mad because she thought Richard Simmons was turning me on. I fell asleep on a couch and I woke up with my stepsisters sitting on both sides of me. I was full erect and wearing thin shorts. I was 16 and they were 15 and 14. I only knew cause I caught one looking. Best friend. Female, was the touchy-feeling type. Lots of random hugs. Always stood really close. Liked to cuddle when watching movies. She also had a boyfriend at basically all points in time. I wasn't really into her like that. We were just really good friends is all. Anyway, one evening we're hanging out watching TV and she stretches out with her head on my lap. No big deal because she does it all the time. As she's moving around getting comfortable, I start getting hard. I was wearing sweatpants so it's not like there's anything keeping the guy in check. She feels me tensing up trying to make it stop, and when she turns to look at me it goes full mast, pressing against the back of her head. She gets mad, leaves, eventually stops talking to me. Whenever I saw my ex crying I got horny. It felt incredible wrong every time. For whatever reason, I always get boners when I'm doing math, in calculus. I would always pop one when doing problems, and by the time the class ended, I always had a rager. I had to tuck that bad boy up through my waistband just to get out of class. Age 10 to 18. I dated my now wife when I accidentally had a boner for her. We were 15 on a band trip to Six Flags. I remember she was wearing a bikini under her clothes and I had shorts and was gonna take off my shirt when we get off the bus. She and I were so into each other but we did not want to make the first move. So we were dating but not really. Well, she took off her shirt and her shorts and this bikini. And I remember still after all these years. I had a hard on right there and it was visible. She asked me if I was gonna get up and walk with her and I told her to go ahead cause I felt sick. I was literally fighting the tug of war battle when she was trying to get me to stand up. When I did, she noticed. She said, "Oh, I see. Well honestly if I was a boy I would have a boner for you too." Wait, that's not what I meant. We just asked each other out then and there and enjoyed our time together still. My girlfriend's grandma's funeral. Not mine. My bunkmate in boot woke up the first morning with a rager of one. The DI just looked at him and told him to stand down son. We don't salute with that. Edit. Thanks for the silver kind Anon. On the ski lift. I was an idiot and said to my friends, "Damn, I just got a random boner and I didn't know that there was a younger girl on the lift." During high school basketball game, the only time I ever thought, "Please, coach, don't put me in. Damn cheerleaders." Went to visit a girlfriend at her university. We went for a swim in the indoor pool as she was training for a half Ironman and seeing her body when she got out of the water got me so hard for so long I had to feign a sudden need to do about 20 more lengths. Hopefully nobody underwater had goggles. Then in the showers afterwards I had a repeat just thinking about it. Luckily nobody was around. Hospital bed blankets seem to be designed to accentuate boners. I had oral surgery when I was in high school. The surgeon was a very attractive man. Before I was anesthetized, he described possibly having to straddle me in order to properly perform surgery. That's when my whole family saw me get an erection. TLDR, I didn't have to come out to my family. 7th grade Spanish class. Had a rando. Teacher needed someone to come to the front of class for an example conversation. I didn't know what to do so just went up there. Everyone was looking at my waistline, holding back snickers. Then it went down in about 5 seconds which got a few audible laughs. It was horrible. I was in middle school. It happened so often that I deliberately started wearing baggy pants and underwear that was one size too small in order to hide them. Yoga class. I was near at the front of the class wearing gym shorts and for some reason my body decided to pitch the biggest tent it could. Like this was the most hard I've ever gotten. I wasn't sexually aroused or anything. My body just decided that this was the perfect time for an erection. Cue several strange looks as I walk past everyone trying to reach the exit on the opposite side of the room while failing miserably to cover up my boner. I stayed in the bathroom for like 10 minutes until it finally subsided. A few years ago at my niece and nephew's birthday party, my brother-in-law's younger cousin came. She was a few years older than me and when I was like 13, I had the biggest crush on her and when we went to a cookout at her parents' house one Labor Day, I asked her out. She was flattered but she was 18 already so she gave me a hug and let me down nice. Fast forward to the birthday party. I hadn't seen her in a while and when she came she hugged and exchanged pleasantries with me. She introduced me to her husband. I never had met him and as I shook his hand, I was at full mast because I had just hugged her. Have 2 roommates. I am consistently always in my undies. No big deal. I have a dog. I am also an early bird. Well, one night, I went to bed to a dark and quiet house. Fell asleep, but woke up with a random boner. Because my dog had to pee, walked out to the living room to let my dog out and apparently, one of my roommates, middle-aged, single female, decided to have her 2 adult daughters, son-in-law, and friend over for a late night visit. I didn't realize people were over until it was too late so I just committed to letting Castor outside and pretending like I was too groggy to care. No one said a word. Raging waters while talking to a hot German chick. I was 15. Not as bad as some of the stories here, but I kinda wanted to die when it happened. I was walking to the subway with my crush after our last exam, and as we were walking it just randomly popped up. I wasn't even thinking about doing anything sexual with her. I was just happy to be with her in that moment. Just glad that she didn't notice, or she's too polite to have said anything. Which she definitely is. I definitely would have fucking jumped off a building if she noticed and got the wrong message. Edit. To clarify, I didn't just want to fuck her. I was actually looking for a relationship with her. Learning tango in ballroom dancing class, and the girl I danced with kept telling me that I should get closer to her. I distinctly remember this. I was 12 years old, doing a physical to get into middle school, and as she was checking for a hernia, it just popped up. I was so embarrassed, and she was just like, "It's normal for your age." God, I hated going to the doctor for a few years after that. LOL. Holding a weeping woman, who I was coming to realize I was in love with, during a funeral wake. I moved her to my side, but I think she knew. Not me, but the student presenter for the Veterans Day program at my high school a few years ago had a raging hard-on in front of not only the school but all of the veterans that showed up, while wearing basketball shorts. r/AskReddit. What is completely harmless but also terrifying as duck? Any insects that jump. I got 2 words for you. Camel. Crickets. My parents' house's basement is infested with camel crickets. I prefer not to go down there. Seaweed touching your foot at the beach. I had a fish swim between my thighs once. It was so freaky. That made me laugh and shudder at the same time. The fish in the lake at my summer camp would occasionally nibble on your nipples. Apparently there are people who are afraid of moths. My wife is afraid of moths, and we looked into it once why people are afraid of them. One theory is people fear moths because they move erratically. Since you can't predict where it is going, your brain starts screaming, "Get the duck away from that thing." Nightmares. But then I wake up and slowly remember that nothing is more frightening than my terrible life. They tell us that monsters are under our bed when they are actually inside our head. In your closet. Sleep paralysis. I don't know if it's completely harmless, but I used to experience it and I wasn't harmed, just terrified. Yep, came here to say this. First time it happened, it was terrifying. Happened in college. Could hear my roommates in the other room watching TV, but I couldn't move or anything. Now it's happened enough that it doesn't really scare me, just annoys me. Sleep paralysis happens to everyone. It's a miscommunication in the brain where one part of the brain is in awake mode and the part that sends signals to your muscles is in sleep mode. Fun fact, depending on where you are brought up, your sleep paralysis monster is different. In the UK it's usually someone sat still at the bottom of your bed or somewhere in the room, whereas in the US it's more likely something approaching you to attack you. Watching videos of people free climbing buildings. r/sweaty palm says hello. People who have extensive doll collections. Every nook and cranny there's a doll staring at you. I do not like being in their house. At all. OP said harmless. After your soul is sucked into one of the dolls you will find yourself immune to harm for all eternity. Thinking about the future. Yay. Lately I've been thinking about when will be the next major impact from a large meteor or comet happens. Not if, but when. And why we aren't working towards a defense for it. We can, but it doesn't seem to be a priority. Nocebo effect. Worrying about something that can happen makes you behave in a way that can possibly lead to the mess you thought about. When you hear a sound at 3 AM in your house. Had a big 100 plus lb German Shepherd when I was younger. Terrifying if you didn't know him, but he was a giant teddy bear who would sulk behind furniture if he thought you didn't like him or were being mean. AWW. Poor boy. I had a female Rottweiler who was a big old tank but loved to cuddle and adored little kids. Weighed about 130 and it took a bit of getting used to when walking her, especially if she got excited. No way you're holding that beast back. She never hurt anyone though, even though it looked like we had a black bear on a leash. LOL. Public speaking. I had, and still have, a stutter which firmly determined what I did and did not want to do while growing up. I always dreaded public speaking. but I still did it despite apprehension and people laughing at me. One minor act by a friend who I doubt remembers it still helps me 30 years later. Now that I'm much older, I've been in numerous positions where I have to talk in front of groups, and refusing to do so just isn't an option. I still dislike it and will avoid it when I can. But public speaking isn't something you can hide from forever. Even if it isn't in a formal I'm giving a speech setting, you're still most likely going to do a lot of it your entire life. Being left alone with my thoughts for too long. I think everyone has this problem these days. That's why we try to keep our minds occupied with other things constantly, like video games, and in my case, sucking dicks. Needles. Just can't get over them. I know it only hurts for a second is probably in my best interest. I'm much the same. I'm absolutely phobic even though I know they don't really hurt that much and are doing me good. There've been times I've passed out and even thrown up from psyching myself up about them too much. You know those big green beetles that fly into everything during the summer? Completely harmless, but huge and look scary AF. Cicadas. They're huge in the Midwest. If I recall correctly, every 17 years the gestation periods align and millions of those fat little noisemakers swarm. It's not too bad if you live somewhat far from forests or natural areas, but it can be brutal if you do. They are fat, unbelievable dumb things that look freaky but are 100% harmless and vital to the ecosystem. They also can die super easily. So if you see one tipped over on its back and making a bunch of noise, be a bro and help the lil dude turn himself over. Darkness. Pretty dangerous if you're walking along a cliff edge. Those dreams where you wake up from falling. If it helps you to know, your brain locks down your body so you don't act out your dreams physically. The feeling of falling is entering and coming out of this. Hopefully you'll have less panic knowing this is why it is happening. Talking to my crush, I guess. I'm just terrified of saying something dumb or inappropriate. Night terrors. Sleep paralysis. You wake up and see a ducking monster sitting on your chest and staring at you or just crawling slowly across the room to you. You try to escape, only to realize that you're paralyzed. It's more realistic than any dream you've ever had. And you can't wake up, because you are awake. Yep, fun. Edit. Fixed name. Sorry about that. Night terrors are a different, also very scary, thing. My son had them when he was younger and they are really scary. He would be screaming and shouting and running around his room, screaming help me. We couldn't snap him out of it and the pediatrician said just to wait it out. So we would watch him do that for 5 minutes and then he would eventually yawn, crawl back in bed and go to sleep. He wouldn't remember a thing the next day. This is an Australian huntsman spider, which grows to about the size of an outstretched human male adult's hand in an urban environment, and up to 3 times the size in rural areas. These little guys can get big, but of all our deadly spiders, snakes, and everything else, they're harmless, great at hunting all our hitty insects, and very afraid of humans, but venture indoors sometimes to escape wet weather in the warmer seasons in a subtropical environment. They can bite, but only if you try to antagonize them so they will defend themselves. They honestly mean you no harm. Oh my god, no. Why did I click that? Why? Number. Get that beastie away from me. Reminds me of a friend who was volunteering at a pet shelter and she refused to go into the room when there was a snake. I refused to go into the room with the giant spider. Who the duck keeps those as a pet? I rather play with the constrictor than deal with the hairy creepy spider. Not being able to breathe through your nose. Babies. I've had friends that want me to hold their newborns and I've always said no because I am afraid I will do something not good like drop them or something. One time I saw the guy drop his kid off his shoulders in IKEA and I've never been the same. Neither has the kid. Certain snakes. I'm rather friendly. Have you ever seen a basking shark? Those things scare the hit out of me, but are harmless unless you're a tiny fish. The ocean. Swimming in it won't hurt you until you go under the surface and look straight down. Thinking about our inevitable death as humans. I don't think death is a bad thing, at least there are far more harmful and painful things living than death itself. However, to the untrained mind, it can be terrifying as FLOL. Getting an MRI. Couldn't agree more. Last time I was supposed to have one, I ended up having a panic attack and getting held down by security until the benzo kicked in. Not doing that again. The sound of a balloon when it pops. It scares the ever-living duck out of me every time. Power going off randomly during a storm. There are all kinds of situations where this could be the very opposite of completely harmless, I would think. I work in a prison. Both terrifying and harmful. The 10 seconds or so before the Jenny kicks on are awful. Once the Jenny didn't come on for minutes. No bueno. Driving. A little painted line on the road and some basic rules is all that separates you from death or extreme injury. My mom's sandals of justice. Going to the dentist. It always gives me a laugh when I walk back to my car thinking how I spent all day worrying about it. Cockroaches, especially those that can fly. Social interaction. Spiders, roaches. Spiders. Came here to say this. I see a house spider, and I give him a thumbs up and tell him keep up the good work. If he's alive, it's because he's eating other bugs that got into my house. Water, puddle, harmless, flood, terrifying.